My name is Lucas, and I've been working at Big Nose Kate's Saloon for almost 2 years. The saloon sits in the heart of Tombstone, Arizona, where history seeps from every brick. Tourists come in daily, thirsty for whiskey and stories about outlaws. I pour drinks, wipe counters, and pretend the ghosts of the past aren't watching. But they are. Everyone who works here knows it. Before we dive into the story, tell me from which country you're listening and what time it is there right now. There are rules we follow, rules we never question. Not corporate policies, but ancient ones written long before management took over. The first night I started, Eric, the head bartender, pulled me aside. He said, "Listen carefully. If you follow the rules, you'll be fine. If you break them, you won't last a week." I thought he was exaggerating. Then he showed me the list pinned to the wall in the staff room. It was handwritten, yellowed with age, and terrifyingly simple. The rules weren't like anything I had seen in other jobs. Rule 1, never leave a glass of whiskey unfinished after midnight. Rule 2, if a patron tips you with old coins, accept them politely, but never spend them. Rule 3, don't touch the piano keys after closing time. Rule 4, if you hear footsteps upstairs, ignore them. Rule 5, never, under any circumstances, serve the man with the black hat. I laughed nervously when I first read them. Eric's face stayed grave. "These rules aren't a joke," he warned. "They've kept this place running for over 100 years. I tried asking what happened if they were broken. He only said, "You'll see things you can't unsee." From that moment, I started noticing the way staff avoided certain corners, or how they flinched when the floorboards creaked upstairs. It wasn't just superstition, it was survival. My first real test came a week later. It was a Friday night, the saloon packed with cowboys, bikers, and tourists. The piano player stopped early and Eric nodded at me. "Time to close," he said. I was about to grab the keys and play a tune as a joke, but his glare stopped me cold. Later that night, as I wiped tables, I heard faint piano notes. No one was near the stage. The sound floated through the smoky air, low and haunting. I froze, my rag dripping whiskey onto the floor. Eric appeared beside me, calm as ever. "Keep working," he whispered. The music grew louder, then faded into silence. My hands shook for the rest of the shift. When I asked him the next morning, he said, "That wasn't for you, it was for them." He never explained who they were. Over time, I adjusted. The rules became second nature, but curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to know what lay upstairs, where footsteps echoed at odd hours. One night, when Eric was gone, I crept toward the stairwell. The boards groaned beneath my weight. Suddenly, a cold wind swept down, carrying whispers I couldn't understand. Fear gripped me, and I stumbled back. The whispers stopped. The air warmed again. I swore never to try that again. Later, I told Sophia, one of the waitresses. Her face paled. "Don't ever go up there," she warned. "They don't like visitors." I asked who they were. She didn't answer, only crossed herself and walked away. That night, I barely slept, haunted by the thought of invisible eyes watching. The saloon wasn't just a bar. It was something older, darker, and hungrier. And the strangest rule came back to haunt me sooner than expected. It was nearing midnight and a tourist left a whiskey glass half full. I almost cleared it, then remembered, never leave whiskey unfinished after midnight, so I drank it down. The liquid burned hotter than usual, leaving a metallic taste. Minutes later, the lights flickered. The room chilled. A shadow passed behind me, though no one was near. I heard faint laughter, dry and ancient, echoing from the walls. Sophia rushed over. "You drank it, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded. She sighed, eyes full of pity. "That's why we don't waste whiskey here. It doesn't belong to us after midnight." The rest of the night, I felt that shadow close, brushing against me whenever I turned. It followed me home, lingering until dawn finally chased it away. After that night, I stopped questioning the rules. I followed them exactly, down to the smallest detail. Still, the saloon seemed eager to remind me of its power. A week later, a stranger walked in wearing a broad black hat. The brim shadowed his face completely. He sat at the bar without ordering. My hands froze as I remembered Rule 5. Never, under any circumstances, serve the man with the black hat. I pretended to be busy polishing glasses. The man's silence pressed against me like a weight. He didn't speak, didn't move, only stared from beneath that shadow. Finally, Eric appeared and walked straight past him. "Go take inventory in the back," he told me. When I returned 10 minutes later, the stool was empty. No one had seen him leave. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though nothing was burning. Eric never explained. Tourists brought their own kind of chaos, but they were harmless compared to the regulars. Some of them seemed tied to the saloon itself, like they belonged to its bones. One older man always tipped in tarnished silver coins. I accepted them politely, as the rules demanded. When I looked closely, I noticed dates scratched off, replaced with markings I couldn't read. I never spent them. Once, Sophia whispered that a new bartender had tried years ago. He vanished a week later, without a trace. No one spoke his name again. I kept a jar of those coins under the counter, each one colder than the last. Sometimes I swore they shifted when no one was watching. Eric noticed me staring once and said quietly, "Don't count them, they're not yours." I shoved the jar away, vowing never to touch it again. But the coins never stopped whispering. By then, I started noticing patterns. The rules weren't random, they kept something contained. The footsteps upstairs grew louder when the piano played by itself. The black-hatted man always appeared when whiskey was wasted. The coins seemed to belong to those who were no longer alive. Everything connected, forming a web that kept the saloon alive and dangerous. Sophia told me once, "Think of it like a truce. As long as we obey, they let us work." Her words chilled me. We weren't employees. We were caretakers for something ancient. The customers laughed and drank, oblivious to the weight pressing down around them. Only staff knew. We carried the burden, silently and faithfully. Still, sometimes curiosity clawed at me. What would happen if the rules were broken on purpose? I never dared to find out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else eventually would. One slow Tuesday, I found myself alone on shift. The saloon was nearly empty, a rare quiet night. I cleaned the counters, humming softly to break the silence. That was when the piano struck a single key. Sharp, loud. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. I froze, rag in hand, my throat tight. No one sat at the piano. No one touched it. Another key rang, lower this time, followed by 3 quick notes. The tune was strange, like an old funeral march. The hairs on my arms stood tall. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The final note lingered too long, vibrating through the floorboards. Then silence returned. I backed away, heart racing. Later, Eric arrived and found me pale and shaking. He only muttered, "Be glad you didn't clap." I never asked him what that meant. The saloon wasn't the only place haunted by the rules. Sometimes they followed us outside. One night, after closing, I walked home under the cold desert moon. The streets of Tombstone were empty, shadows stretching long. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy. I turned. Nothing. The sound continued, perfectly matching my pace. I quickened my stride, heart pounding. Still the echo followed. When I finally reached my apartment door, I risked a glance back. A figure in a black hat stood at the far corner, watching silently. I fumbled with my keys, shoved the door open, and locked it tight. The figure never moved closer. But from my window, I saw him remain all night, a statue in the dark. By sunrise, he was gone. I didn't sleep at all. That was the night I realized the rules weren't confined to the saloon. After that encounter, I refused to walk home alone. Sophia often joined me, chatting nervously to drown out the silence. She confessed that she once heard the footsteps too. "They follow you until dawn," she whispered. I asked if she had ever seen the man in the black hat. Her face darkened. "Twice. The first time he watched me all night. The second time he followed me into my dreams. I didn't ask for details." The air grew colder just hearing her words. Back at the saloon, I noticed new scratches on the bar's surface. Deep, uneven, as if carved by nails. Eric insisted no one had touched it. That night, I dreamt of the black-hatted man sitting at the counter, dragging his nails across the wood. When I woke, my hands were shaking and my nails were cracked, as if I had been clawing in my sleep. Life at the saloon moved on, but the rules weighed heavier. Every night felt like walking a tightrope between worlds. Tourists laughed, drank, and snapped photos of the Old West decor. Meanwhile, we staff kept glancing at the clock, listening for piano notes and footsteps. One evening, a group of bikers grew rowdy, demanding music after closing. One of them slammed the piano lid open. My stomach twisted. I shouted for him to stop, but he struck a single chord. The sound rattled through the saloon, unnaturally loud. All 5 bikers froze, their laughter dying instantly. The chandelier swayed though no wind blew. One by one, they backed out the door without another word. The lid slammed shut on its own, echoing like thunder. Sophia whispered, "You're lucky they listened." I realized then, the rules didn't just protect us. They protected everyone inside, even the clueless. The upstairs still haunted my thoughts. No one ever explained what lived above, but the footsteps persisted, louder with each passing week. Sometimes they ran, other times dragged as if something heavy was being pulled. One night, unable to resist, I placed my ear against the locked stairwell door. At first, silence, then breathing. Deep, slow, rattling like lungs full of dust. It was right on the other side. I staggered back, trembling, heart slamming against my ribs. The next day, Eric noticed my pale face and said, "Stay away from the door, Lucas." I asked him how he knew. He replied flatly, "Because they don't like when someone listens." Later, I found a bloody handprint smeared across the banister. It wasn't there before. I scrubbed it clean, but the stain returned the following night. I stopped asking questions. For weeks, nothing major happened, only small disturbances. Whispers in the corners, glasses sliding slightly when no one touched them, the silver coins clinking in their jar without reason. But I noticed something new. The rules seemed to shift depending on who was working. When Sophia was on shift, the piano grew restless. When Eric worked, the footsteps upstairs calmed. With me, it was always the whiskey. Half-finished glasses multiplied whenever I was behind the bar. It felt personal, as if the saloon, or whatever ruled it, had chosen our roles. One night, I confronted Eric about it. He stared at me a long time, then said, "Maybe it's not the saloon. Maybe it's them." He refused to clarify, but his words lingered. If they assigned each of us a burden, then I was forever tied to that unfinished whiskey. A storm rolled into Tombstone late one evening, thunder shaking the windows. Rain hammered the streets, rare and violent for the desert. The saloon should have felt safe, but instead, it pulsed with unease. The lights flickered with every crack of lightning. At midnight, a glass of whiskey slid across the counter on its own. No one was near it. The liquid trembled, rippling in perfect rhythm with the thunder. I stared, frozen, until Sophia grabbed my arm. "Don't drink it," she hissed. The glass tipped and spilled onto the wood, soaking into the grain. The entire saloon groaned as if alive. The chandelier shook violently, then stilled. When the storm passed, the glass was gone, leaving only a wet ring where it once sat. Eric later told me storms woke them. That was the first night I realized the rules weren't enough when the desert raged. After the storm, the saloon's atmosphere grew heavier. The floorboards seemed to creak under invisible weight, even when the room was empty. Customers still came, oblivious, but I noticed how they drank faster, laughed louder, desperate to leave before midnight. One night, a tourist woman asked about the strange jar of coins. I lied, saying it was part of the decor. Her husband reached for one, but before his fingers touched the glass, it rattled violently. He jerked back, face pale. They left without finishing their drinks. When I looked again, the jar was perfectly still. Sophia whispered, "They don't like thieves." That evening, I counted the coins despite Eric's warning. There were more than before. Dozens more, piled to the brim, though I hadn't accepted a single one that night. I stopped looking at the jar after that, but I never moved it. Eric carried secrets like weight on his shoulders. He never spoke much, but his silence told stories. One late shift, I caught him standing in front of the piano, unmoving, staring at the keys. The bar was empty, chairs stacked, lights low. I called his name softly. He didn't flinch. The keys shifted on their own, playing two soft notes. Eric exhaled as if relieved. Then he turned and walked away, ignoring me completely. Later, I pressed him for answers. He finally said, "My father worked here, and his father before him. The piano knows our blood." It chilled me to the core. The rules weren't just old traditions, they were inherited burdens. That night, I wondered if I too was chosen. Not by chance, but by something deeper. The thought left me restless, unable to sleep. I felt the piano waiting in my dreams. One evening, a new waiter named Adrian joined the staff. He was tall, confident, and skeptical of the rules. We warned him gently, but he laughed. "Ghost stories for tourists," he said. On his second night, he ignored the unfinished whiskey rule. A glass sat untouched after midnight. He poured it into the sink. The drain hissed, steam rising as if the liquid burned. The lights flickered violently. From the corner of the saloon, laughter erupted, dry, brittle, echoing. Adrian froze, his bravado gone. The laughter followed him for the rest of the night, drifting from every corner he moved to. He begged Eric for help, but Eric only said, "Finish the whiskey next time." Adrian quit after a week, trembling and pale. He left town the very next day. No one heard from him again. Sophia and I grew closer after Adrian's disappearance. She confessed she sometimes dreamt of the upstairs rooms. "Not dreams," she corrected. "Invitations." She described a long hallway lined with doors, each one carved with symbols. In her dream, the doors rattled as if something inside was trying to escape. When she reached for one, she always woke up. Her hands shook as she told me this. I realized then she carried more fear than she ever let show. That same night, I dreamt of the hallway too. The doors whispered my name in voices like wind through cracks. Unlike Sophia, I reached for a handle. Before I could turn it, the black-hatted man appeared at the end of the hall. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. When I told Sophia, she whispered, "Don't open them. That's what they want." By then, I couldn't deny it. The saloon had chosen us. We weren't employees, but guardians, shackled to rules older than the town itself. Sometimes tourists caught glimpses of the truth. A man once asked why the mirrors behind the bar were always covered at night. I lied again, saying it was to prevent cracks from the desert cold, but I knew the real reason. Mirrors reflected things that weren't supposed to be seen. Once I forgot to cover one in time. For a split second, I saw myself behind the counter, only older, with sunken eyes, skin pale, lips cracked. The reflection smiled when I didn't. I threw the cloth over it instantly, heart hammering. The smile lingered in my mind for days. The rules weren't just survival, they were barriers between us and something waiting for release. The longer I stayed, the more I noticed how the saloon bent time. Some nights passed in a blur, as if hours folded into minutes. Other nights dragged endlessly, every second stretching like an eternity. One Friday, a group of college kids stumbled in near closing. They laughed loudly, ignoring our subtle hints to leave. One girl sat at the piano, striking random keys. I begged her to stop. She grinned and played louder. The lights cut out instantly, plunging us into total darkness. Her laughter turned into a shriek. When the lamps flickered back on, she was standing by the door, pale and trembling. None of us had seen her move. She whispered, "Something grabbed me." Her friends dragged her outside without another word. I never saw her again, though sometimes, faintly, I swear I hear her scream echo when the piano stirs. Sophia often said the upstairs was hungrier on weekends. I didn't want to know what she meant, but I found out anyway. Saturday night, footsteps thundered above us, faster and heavier than ever before. The chandelier rattled as glasses clinked violently on the shelves. I covered my ears, but the noise drilled into my skull. Then, silence. Every customer froze, staring at the ceiling. Eric moved calmly to the stairwell and pressed his palm against the door. The footsteps stopped instantly. He turned back to us with a tired expression. "Get everyone out," he said. We closed early, sending customers stumbling into the street. Sophia whispered, "It's getting worse." Her face was pale, her eyes wet. That night, I lay awake, hearing phantom steps circling above my apartment ceiling. There was nothing above me but empty sky. Still, I heard them until dawn. The next week brought a rare quiet spell. Tourists came and went, leaving only laughter and spilled drinks. But I noticed the coins jar nearly overflowed again. Sophia and I decided to move it into the storage room, hoping distance would ease its pull. Together, we lifted it, heavier than stone, and carried it across the hall. As we walked, the coins inside rang like bells. Each note was sharp, dissonant, scraping against my skull. When we set it down, silence fell. But when I turned, I saw new carvings on the storeroom door, symbols like the ones Sophia described from her dreams. Neither of us touched the jar again. Later, Eric saw it in storage and said nothing, only gave a slow nod. It was as if we had obeyed something without realizing it. But I couldn't shake the feeling we had only delayed its hunger. Eventually, I stopped separating my life from the saloon. Everywhere I went, the rules followed. At the grocery store, I saw a whiskey bottle left half-finished in someone's cart. My hands itched to drink it. On a walk, I heard footsteps behind me, though the street was empty. Even in daylight, I saw reflections twist in glass windows, like the mirror I once forgot to cover. The saloon had bled into my world. One night, Sophia admitted she felt the same. "Maybe it's not the saloon keeping us here," she whispered. "Maybe it's inside us now." Her words struck me harder than anything. If she was right, leaving Tombstone wouldn't matter. We were tethered. We were carriers of the rules, guardians not by choice, but by binding. I didn't want to believe her, but deep down, I already knew it was true. The last true test came without warning. It was a Sunday evening, the saloon quiet, only a few locals nursing drinks. Suddenly, the front door creaked open on its own. No wind, no footsteps. The room chilled instantly. Every customer went silent. Then the man in the black hat entered. He moved slowly, deliberately, taking his usual seat at the bar. This time he placed a silver coin on the counter. My blood froze. I didn't dare touch it. His shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally, reaching toward me. The piano played a low note, vibrating through the floor. Eric appeared and gripped my shoulder. "Go to the back," he whispered. I obeyed, heart hammering, ears straining for any sound. When I returned minutes later, the stool was empty. The coin was gone. Eric's face was grim. "They're testing us more often now," he said quietly. After the black-hatted man's visit, the saloon felt different. Not haunted, but watched. Every corner seemed sharper, every shadow thicker. Customers still came, laughing and drinking, but I felt their presence less and less. The real company was unseen. Sophia confessed she hadn't slept in days. The dreams were constant, the hallway with rattling doors returning every night. She said her name was whispered in dozens of voices. Meanwhile, Eric grew quieter, working with mechanical precision, his eyes hollow. I realized he had endured this for years, maybe decades. We were simply the next in line. One evening, as we closed, Sophia asked, "Do you think anyone will ever leave?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I had no answer. The silence between us felt heavier than any ghost. The rules were no longer instructions, they were shackles. That week, I decided to test my fate. One night, after closing, I poured a glass of whiskey and left it half-finished. The saloon went silent. No wind, no sound, no creak of wood. Even my heartbeat seemed muted. The liquid began to ripple as if something stirred within. I forced myself not to touch it. Minutes dragged on like hours. Then a handprint appeared in the condensation on the glass. Thin, bony, impossibly long. It smeared slowly, as though a face pressed against invisible glass between worlds. I threw the drink into the sink. The glass shattered with a scream, high and sharp. When I turned, the piano lid had opened. Keys pressed down slowly, one by one. I ran outside into the desert air, gasping. The rules were not warnings. They were bargains, and I had nearly broken one. The saloon grew hungrier after that night. Even Eric admitted it. "Their patience is thinning," he muttered. Tourists noticed odd things too. Some claimed their phones died instantly when pointed toward the upstairs. Others swore they heard voices whispering beneath the music. One woman refused to enter, staring at the windows with wide eyes. She said a pale man was watching from above, but the upstairs was sealed. No one lived there. I thought of Sophia's dreams and the rattling doors. Perhaps they weren't dreams at all. Perhaps the upstairs was the hallway, and each rule we followed kept those doors closed. The realization made me shiver. Every night I worked faster, more obedient, desperate not to fail. The smallest mistake could loosen a lock, and if even one door opened, I feared all would. By then, I knew I would never leave. The saloon had rooted itself into me, threading through my thoughts, my sleep, my blood. I saw silver coins glimmering in places they shouldn't be, sidewalks, pockets, even under my pillow. I heard piano notes in the sound of wind, in passing cars, in the beating of my heart. The footsteps followed me everywhere, not just to my apartment, but into every corner of town. Once I looked into a shop window and saw the black-hatted man standing behind me. When I turned, he was gone, but I felt his shadow linger. Sophia avoided talking about escape now. She only worked in silence, her hands trembling. Eric seemed older each day, carrying an invisible weight. We weren't bartenders or servers anymore. We were keepers of rules, chained to something ancient, and the chains only tightened. The last night, I remember, clearly began like any other. Tourists filled the saloon, laughter echoing, drinks flowed, coins clinked, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. But then the piano played on its own, a long, low note that silenced the entire room. The chandelier swayed. The air grew frigid. One by one, the lights went out until only the bar remained lit. In that glow, the black-hatted man appeared again, seated with his coin. He didn't look at me this time. He looked at Sophia. She froze, tears running down her face. Eric whispered, "Don't move." The man tipped his hat, then vanished into shadow. The lights returned, the saloon alive again, as if nothing had happened. But we knew better. The rules were never meant to be broken. They were meant to prepare us for what's coming next.